So here we go to the laws of diminishing contrast, which has to do with the spatial implications of color. And the laws of diminishing contrast is a term that refers to the same principles as atmospheric perspective or aerial perspective. All three of those are the same thing. What I have here and why I've got it copyrighted, and I have to give myself credit, this is like probably the highest level of genius in my teaching, has to come up with this chart where across the top I've divided it into space, foreground, middle ground, and background. And then vertically down the left column, I've divided color into its three primary components: value, temperature, and purity. And then as you look at where those horizontals and verticals intersect, tells you what you could expect. So with value, which is just how light or dark a given color is, in the foreground, you could expect anything from high to low contrast. And if it was a sunny day, which is just an example, that means that you could see anything from 0% gray, aka white, to 100% gray, aka black. When you look further off into space, which means light has to travel a greater distance to reach you, you're likely to see something on a clear sunny day of something in the range of a 10% gray to an 80% gray. And then when you look way off in the distance, which means light has to travel through atmospheric interference, particles of dust and moisture and smog or whatever in the air, your contrast is going to be reduced even lower to probably on a clear sunny day something like a 20% gray to, let's say, a 50% gray. Hence, the laws of diminishing contrast is the further off you look into space or the further light has to travel to reach you, the contrast diminishes from high contrast to middle contrast to low contrast. In relation to temperature, what happens is that in the foreground you could see colors that range anywhere from warm to cool. As light has to travel a greater distance to you in the middle ground, you'll see colors that range from neutral to cool. And as you're looking off into the greater distance, you're going to see only cool colors. Again, the range of contrast diminishes the further off you're looking into space, which is the same thing as the further that light has to travel in order to reach you. And again, traveling through atmospheric interference like dust, smog, whatever happens to be there, moisture. Purity, which I've talked a bit about, purity is something you can't create. Colors are either pure coming out of the tube or they're not. And you need to know which colors are pure and which aren't, which I'm not going to explain here right now. But I am going to explain that in relation to the laws of diminishing contrast, in the foreground, you could see colors that range anywhere from the purest to the most impure colors. When light travels a little greater distance in the middle ground to get to you, you're going to see colors that I'm going to call, because the English language does not have words that describe increments of purity. So I'm going to describe it here as colors that are less pure to impure. And note that there is no pure color in the middle ground. When we get way off into the background, what occurs is that you're going to see only impure color, and that the colors that you're going to see are going to be impure in a dirty gray way. My term, dirty gray way. It means we're not creating impurity via crossing complements. we're creating impurity via the addition of black, which again, I'm saying black is the color, and I'm saying that the dirty gray impurity, which actually could exist anywhere from the foreground to the middle ground to the background, but it dominates the background, is actually the dominant level of purity and color on planet Earth, which, by the way, is the one that we're on. So that's the story on this. And if you look at this, now let's just go up, and I'll only talk about the background here. And I see this all the time in terms of like what moves an artist make given the likelihood that they're attempting to create a deep space realistic landscape. Okay, so let's put it in that context. Artist is trying to create a deep space three-dimensional landscape. We know that there should not be any strong lights or any strong darks in the background. As soon as you see strong lights or darks in the background, it is an error in terms of creating the illusion of natural space. So, the night sky is dark. Are you going to use 100% gray black? No, because it's in the background. Are you going to have stars or the moon that are 0% gray white? No, because it's in the background. If you use the black or white, which is not wrong expressively, but it is wrong in terms of trying to create a natural illusion of space. So, let's go down to temperature. And I'm just going to talk in the background here. Warm colors only ever exist in the foreground, so they shouldn't be in the middle ground. But I see paintings all the time that have ultramarine blue skies, and it doesn't work. It looks wrong. Why is it wrong? Ultramarine blue is warm. The only temperature of color that should exist in the background is cool. And then as we move into the element of purity, the same thing goes, as only true pure color belongs in the foreground, but the presence of pure color in the background is, as far as the illusion of natural space, is an error. It destroys the spatial illusion. So there's got to be some element of impurity in the background. So there you go. If you learn the principles that have been laid out in relation to the color charts and this chart, the laws of diminishing contrast, a la James Torlakson invention, you're going to be a much more powerful painter, and also you're going to be able to understand the world you see with much greater consciousness. And in fact, if you apply these principles when you're working from imagination, you can create the illusion of natural space by exploiting these principles. So there you go. I hope this has been really useful to you. Goodbye. Just one more thought is these principles don't only apply to issues relating to realism and the intention of creating three-dimensional space. The principles apply to realism, to abstraction, to non-objective painting, because the spatial implications of color, especially issues of temperature and purity and contrast and value, apply to all forms. So if you're, dumping gallons of paint off a 50-story building and it hits a canvas down on the street, the warm colors will tend to advance, the cool colors will tend to recede, etc., etc. So this information is valuable to all artists, not just realists. Goodbye once again.